Welcome into the show tonight. I am Brian Keating, joined by special guest Andrew Schlecht from The Athletic and the Down to Dunk podcast, certainly one of the real insiders on the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the reason that I wanted to bring you in, Andrew, is because you really have this perspective from when they got here and through the golden years. And now as the rebuild continues, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. And so I want to start with SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who Mark Daigneault last week talked about his injury, the plantar fascia, and called it really a severe tear. So I just want to get your take as the future for Oklahoma City. You concerned about this injury moving forward, or is this just something at the end of the year they don't want to play him anyways?
Yeah, I think that he'll be okay. I think this is a rest injury, and they've done that. They've rested him, and he looks okay. He's not in a boot. He's not. There's not a lot of things that I look at and say, oh my gosh, this is concerning for the future of his game. I don't think so. I think that they want him to be 100% before he plays. I don't think he's there yet. I think he's probably close. But the risk of playing him at the end of this season, to the last 3 games of the season, there's just no point in it. And so even if he was, say he's 90% right now, what's the point? You're not going to play him. You're trying to lose these games so that you can get a higher draft pick. It would actually be catastrophic if you try to play him now and they win these last 3 games and they bump themselves back up to 6 or 7. That's catastrophic. So they're not going to do that. They're going to make sure he's 100%. I think he wants to play for Team Canada. I think that's a big deal to him. And then you want him healthy going into next season when maybe you have a shot to do something. So no, I'm not concerned about it long term. It was a major injury. If they were to be in the playoffs, I don't know how much he would have actually played, so that it would have been a real bummer, but it actually kind of worked out in kind of a strange way for the Thunder this season.
What's his ceiling? I mean, he's obviously he's a future All-Star. What's his ceiling?
I think it's actually higher than what people think, because this is a guy that led the league in drives. He posted numbers that only guys like Jokic and Giannis posted this year. I mean, nobody does what he's doing. And the fact that he can hit a step back 3 and hit it above 40%. People forget he took 5 threes per game this season at 42%. And these are largely off the dribble. These are largely guarded by the best opposing player. He had so much on his plate, and he handled every single thing. He upped his free throw rate. He upped his three-point rate. He stayed efficient, and he became a guy that was just dominant at driving to the rim and finding guys. You give him somebody that has gravity, and this is the whole point in tanking, is so you can get somebody to put next to him.
Yeah.
You put somebody next to him that can bring the defense away from him. Watch out. This guy could be a top 15 player in the league. I don't have a doubt about that.
You know, I think a guy that came out of nowhere a season ago, Lu Dort, we've argued, me and Carson have argued on this show what his ceiling might be. And this guy's just blossomed. I mean, undrafted and super athletic. But what do you make of his season, and what's the future for Lu Dort? Because I think his ceiling could be an all-star.
You know, I don't want to put a ceiling on him. He didn't get drafted, one.
That's crazy.
And he played in the G League, came onto the team, ended up scoring 30 in Game 7. And I honestly came into the season thinking perhaps that 30-point game in Game 7 could have been a fluke. Well, he comes in and he proves that that's completely wrong. He scores 42 points in a game. You know how many players score 42 in a game? I don't care who they're playing with. I don't care how many shots he gets. To think that he could do that, I would guarantee you 0 scouts out of ASU would have said that he could score 42 in a game. 0. And now he's doing that. He scored 14 points per game. He's shooting 34% from 3, a guy that wasn't supposed to shoot it at all. On 6 attempts, this is on volume. And a lot of those threes have come with the best defender on him too, because he's played so much without SGA and has been the guy and has won them games that they had no business winning. And they beat Boston. They weren't supposed to beat Boston. That was because of Lu Dort. That's because Lu Dort decided to win that game. And so I have a hard time. I think the most reasonable outcome for him is, and I'm not trying to compare their games, but a Serge Ibaka level player where he is
pretty high,
certainly one of the best players on your team. Yeah. And if he hits it right, sure, he could make an all-star team. But I even hesitate to put a ceiling on him because he's a worker. He's a guy that will continue to get better. And I'm very, very interested to see the kind of player he comes back in the fall, because this offseason is going to be big for lots of guys. I think it's really big for Lou. I think it's big for SGA. I think it's big for Pokusevski. I think that not only are the Thunder going to get a high draft pick, I think they have a lot of guys that the Thunder continue to kind of ratchet up their ceilings with a lot of these guys. And I think Lou Dort definitely counts as one of those guys.
All right, you brought him up, Aleksej Pokusevski. And so I want to talk about Poku and Teo Maledon, the two draft picks for Oklahoma City last year. And when Poku was drafted, I think everybody would agree his ceiling was really high. I mean, you look at a guy who's 7 foot tall and can do some of the things and athletic, but his floor was like can't play in the NBA. And now, like Pokusevski's ceiling is still really high, but his floor is certainly an NBA rotation player. What do you make of his rookie season and Teo and those two guys moving forward?
Yeah, Poku is the ultimate wild card when it comes to the development of this team into a contender type of team. He could be the difference in this happening in 3 years or in literally like 1.5 seasons. Like, you could see them taking off because of him. At 7 feet, nobody throws the passes that he does from the wing. Because you can talk about like Jokic is obviously like an immense talent, but he doesn't move like Poku is a wing. He's 7 feet tall. He's a wing. And really the only other big that you can compare to him is really Kevin. And I don't want to make like the Kevin Durant scoring comparison because he's obviously not the scorer, but the fluidity that he has at that size and the kind of, and he really figured this out after he got back from the G League bubble, is the start and stop capabilities. Because he now understands the rhythms of NBA defenses. And so he has learned to kind of manipulate his way into the lane and to score around the basket and to whip passes across the court after a drive. And nobody at his size does that. His numbers were awful to start this season. You can take a look at them. And I mean, he shot 24% from the field before the G League bubble. Afterwards, it's still not good, but it's like kind of normal bad, like 35% from the field.
He's the youngest player in the league.
Youngest player in the league. Tons of runway left for development for him. The fact that he can drive, pull up, and pop from 2 like he does, like that's something. The fact that he can pass the way that he does and generate something out of the pick and roll, that's something. And I talked about the gravity for Poku or for SGA earlier. Poku needs other good players to play around. And it's been the fact that he could do anything at all with the cast of characters that's on this team is really something. So he's another guy that a year of development. And remember, you talk about him being young. Not only is he a young guy, he's a guy who doesn't speak English very well. He's 19 years old. He's been put in a country he's never been in, a city he's never been in a league he didn't know a lot about when he got here. I mean, he called the trade a transfer when he came here. He doesn't know a lot about the NBA. And not only that, he had to go to Orlando for the bubble for a while, and then he had to come back. I mean, shoot, man, if I were 19 years old and knew a lot about the NBA and a lot about this country, I would have still struggled. And he has gotten better throughout the season. And it's because the dude loves basketball. And 2, I think it's Mark Daigneault, man. I think Mark has really gotten through to a lot of these guys, and I think you can add Poku to that list.